We got it. We're going to discuss healthcare today. We're going to focus on aspects of AI, its relevancy, its applicability, why it's relevant, popular, what are its positives, what are the obstacles for AI, what are the obstacles for AI in the new upcoming administration. And we're also going to be addressing novel ways and unique ways to fund companies that are commercializing AI or significantly utilizing AI as part of their commercialization strategy. We're waiting to get our third panelist, Norm Freeland, up on the screen. Hi, Norm, how are you? Okay, perfect, terrific. So I'm Steve Katz. I'm a healthcare consultant. I'll give my background in the end. Our panel is comprised of Cash, Robin Blackstone, and Norm Freeland. Colby is a gentleman who operates a venture studio called Camelot Biocapital. He's the co-founder, and they do development, and they're an advisory group. And I'm going to ask Colby to comment a little more broadly on what he does for a moment or two.
No.
Yeah, is it on? Just press it. It should be green.
Press the it's flashing. Testing.
You should share it. Give me. I'll have them change the battery.
All right. I think we're in business. So thank you for that introduction. Camelot Biocapital is originally a spin out of a family office, and we're structured as a venture studio, which means that we wear two hats. We're not just an investor, and we're also not just the entrepreneur, but we do a combination of both. So on the fund level, we raise capital through family offices around the globe, including ours. And then on the studio level, we search the globe for novel drug therapeutics and build out the companies and finance them down the FDA pipeline until they're mature enough for an exit. So that's the gist of what we do. And to contrast it with a VC is usually passive investment dollars, and maybe they own 10, 20, 30% of each portfolio. In the case of a studio, it's more 50 to 90% ownership. And
so you're closer to a control investor, which is a term that most people in the audience understand.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's how I describe it.
Thank you. First question. How do your portfolio companies utilize AI to enhance and accelerate drug development? How do you specifically apply it to make use of it?
Sure. So our main thesis is investing directly into biotechnologies and not necessarily the AI, but because of the controlling interest in our hand in the pot of business development, we look to partner with AI companies in the biotech space. And so I'm not a believer that there's going to be one AI platform that's a panacea for all biotech innovation, but rather it's going to be hundreds of AI tools, maybe thousands, that all play a role in improving the efficiency of biotech development. Maybe that's decreasing the price, accelerating the path forward of biotech development. And so we look at the individual needs of all of our portfolios and which tools make the most sense for value creation. Now, we also vet AI companies where the value inflection of them might be 10 years down the road and there's no immediate value, and we generally pass, or we help the entrepreneur or manager of the company maybe restructure the product market fit because they do have something there that could be used in the more immediate term.
We know that healthcare is. How do we shut this off? Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes. There you go.
Okay, I'm back on. You know, healthcare is one of the unique spaces where you get the benefit of what I call the present value of the future dream. So that if there's a timeline down the pike where the company could be worth $40 billion, you know, healthcare specifically has a, so to speak, discounted back valuation mentality. It's worth something as you progress through the pipeline. Albeit the value goes up geometrically, but you don't have that in the IT space. You don't have that in other spaces, to the best of my knowledge. You have that in healthcare. Anyway, can you give us an example of where you use an AI tool to solve a problem for a portfolio company that would enhance product development? Could you give us an example that we can
Sure.
simplistically correlate to?
We have one portfolio company. It's a spin out of University of Florida for brain cancer. And within the portfolio, we have an mRNA vaccine. They published some of their clinical data in the journal Cell and very quickly became the top 1% of research in the journal's history to be referenced. And we have some other programs as well. And we have a robust oncology platform. But what about using that same technology for autoimmune disease, neuro diseases, obesity, et cetera, et cetera? So can we repurpose that same tech? And what we did is we partnered, the name of the company is iOncology. We partnered it with Sandbox AQ, which is you're familiar.
Their SIM product.
Right, right. So for those that don't know, they're an AI post-quantum spin out of Google Alphabet. And large language models are very popular as sort of the data source. And in the case of Sandbox, they're using quantum data sets and computational chemistry, stuff I definitely don't understand at a high level, but they utilize that to find new targets, new receptors, and it's much cheaper to repurpose technology than, starting from scratch. And I think the FDA is also gonna, into the future, create more accelerated pathways for repurposed products.
So how does the repurposing differ from a platform technology that would have an application for breast cancer, or a technology that would at the same time have potential indications for lung cancer or brain cancer? How is this repurposing different from a platform technology that's moving to different applications? Or is it effectively the same thing?
Well, there's a number of aspects of a platform technology. Maybe a platform technology works without altering the molecule or the construct for a number of different indications. In the case of Sandbox, we want to maybe alter it in such a way that it's able to go after new disease targets that wouldn't in its original form. So you're not starting from scratch, you're mainly altering it.
So you're altering the basic molecular structure. That would be a distinction from a platform technology, because the platform technology would, not for sure in all cases, but that would typically be the same molecular structure. You're just applying it to a different set of cancer cells or a different set of therapeutics. Okay, that's good. Let's talk a little bit about regulatory. Clearly, the regulatory process is challenging and difficult for many companies. How can AI successfully streamline a regulatory approval process or a regulatory pathway process? How will it expedite and facilitate that?
Sure. So on average, from the time a drug is discovered to the time it's has regulatory approval is 17 years, which is way too long. And so anything that condenses that period of time, I view as improving the efficiency of the regulatory pathway. There's a company that we advise in the psychiatric space. Their main indication is panic disorder. And there's a couple of challenges in the psych space, but one of the main ones is that patients can have up to a 60% placebo effect rate. So subpopulations that would have statistical significance, or they would have benefit from the drug, are going to get overlooked. So for that company, we're reviewing an AI tool that can actually predict the placebo. And how they do that is they measure the brain waves through EEG feedback signals, and they run it through a platform, and they have the machine learning components. And so if they're able to predict the placebo, that means they could reach the statistical significance much greater by stratifying the data, and you don't need as many patients for the trial. So that decreased costs, but it also shortens the period of time of patient recruitment, thereby then also decreasing the time that it takes to progress the technology down the FDA pipeline. So that's
For
one
those in the audience that don't understand the significance of the patient recruitment timetable, when companies do a phase 2 or a phase 3 clinical, it sometimes takes a year to get the first 5 or 10 patients of a 50-patient study. So I think what you're describing is very significant. We all understand what AI is potentially doing to all these topics that you've discussed, and we're going to be discussing further on our panel. But what do you think is going to be the next big hurrah in the next 5 years that's going to impact biotechnology development, and in general drug development?
So I'd like to double down on the timeline of drug approvals, and we're going to see AI tools that you could roll it out in a patient in an EHR and find patient recruitment quicker. You could run simulations where maybe we don't need as many animal models, or we could just a lot fewer subjects, both animal and human models. And there was also recently FDA ruling for I think there's gene therapy platforms of potentially not going back into humans if you're using the same tech for a different indication. So I think we're going to see more accelerated pathways as AI is able to validate it. And let's be audacious and say in 5-10 years, maybe you could cut down the timeline by 50%.
So is
Why not?
the FDA demonstrating a willingness to accept less patients for a clinical endpoint as a result of what's taking place in AI? Is that how the FDA looks at it? Are they willing to entertain that? Say, instead of 125 patients based upon simulation data, so on and so forth, will we really be able to cut the patient size to 100 or 75? Is that real world?
So what we've been seeing is less so with the modeling, although I'd like it to go in that direction, but more along the lines of speeding up the pathway for same drug, different indications. So
Okay.
maybe skipping some of the earlier steps, like in animal models, et cetera.
So referencing the previous clinical results through alternative validation means to accelerate the next product using the same or a modified molecular structure. That's what you're suggesting.
Exactly.
Okay, well, that's very good. Did you have any more comments to make on your area before we move to Robin?
I don't have any other comments that come directly to mind, but I think if there's something that is exciting in the next 10 years, I believe with all the innovation out there, that hopefully solid cancers will be a controllable disease, much like blood cancers. And so that's something that I'm looking forward to.
Well, we thank you for that. Feel free to jump in as we continue our panel discussion.
I do have a question. Is the ambition to be faster or more thorough?
Could you just repeat the question one more time?
Is the ambition to be faster or more thorough?
So I would say my knee-jerk reaction is both.
Yes. I think they go hand in hand, Marty. I think the FDA wants to know that there's a statistical significance and certainty associated with what they're doing. And the idea that AI can simulate, and I think you made that clear, it may not be faster for the specific indication, but faster for future indications. I think those two subjects work in tandem. They're really together. They're really one.
And it might be that it's faster because it's more specific to the exact thing that you're trying to get to, rather
Okay.
than more of a general, we're having to sort out a lot of people that really shouldn't be in the trial. So if we can sort those out ahead of time or identify them through other methods of study, that might really speed up the process. But it also will be very specific to the group that we're trying to treat.
Terrific. Thank you. So you just heard a little bit from our next speaker. Our next speaker is Robin Blackstone, who is a surgeon with extensive background in oncology and obesity. She also possesses a significant level of expertise in infrastructure, AI, risk, and crisis management. So can you comment a little bit further about your background and what you do for a moment or two before we go into some questions?
Sure. I also have had a lot of experience at a really tough time in medicine during COVID, running a big university hospital, managing ORs and thousands of cases, ICU. So it's, that's one part of my history. And also, I just recently came out of J&J. I worked for Ethicon as their global preclinical clinical medical affairs, but I also ran their innovation consideration board that was a global board, and was the chair of that for about 5 years for the J&J Institute before that. So my interests are pretty broad based.
So what areas of AI are significant, prominent, of interest in the healthcare space today?
We have a really particular problem, and it's not unique to medicine, but we think it is. And that is we have too much data. The data is doubling about every 70 days, meaning the clinical data. In addition, the data that's now being generated through EHRs, all of the details of someone's care. So these areas are really ripe for AI. This is a perfect place for AI. It can sort through the things that make a difference from the things that don't and give us the better answer. And so you're seeing a lot of work being done by hospital systems. And frankly, I'm not sure that they're getting all the best advice all the time about this, but they're trying to put in pieces of AI that will make the front end of things for patients smoother, and that will make the back end for revenue and that type of thing easier for them. So that's one way that you're really seeing it used a lot in terms of the healthcare delivery system. The other way that we're seeing, and I think this is a really exciting space, is we're seeing a lot of new companies coming online using AI-driven tools like Amazon uses them, right? Like getting all this patient data and then figuring out kind of what that patient will be motivated by and how they can really, connect into that to do kind of more individualized motivation and care. And you're going to see a number of companies, I think, in that space as well.
So Robin, what I've come to learn about AI is it's able in a significant manner to process multi-level analytics versus single-level analytics simultaneously. So it could absorb a gob of information that doesn't have to get fed in 4 or 5 different ways, different times, and it can sort it all out in its internal calculations, for lack of a better term, and it has the ability to absorb, analyze, integrate, subsume massive amounts of data. Would you agree that?
It does. What's changed a lot in AI, which was kind of where we were going with this, is we're able now not only to get all that data and process it, but to ask it questions and have it respond to us in a way that's really critical for patient care.
The utilization of the endpoint.
Yeah, and that's changing everything. And we give this example. Let's say that you're a person who has a history of gout and you wake up in the morning in bed with a terrible pain in your toe. How easy is it then to just tap your phone, talk to your doctor who's digital, and immediately at 2 a.m, you're getting relief. They tell you what you need to do. They coordinate your schedule. Everything takes place around the patient's context, not around the hospital's context, not around the doctor's context. And this really changes the landscape for how people experience care. And that's going to be, I think, one of the strongest ways that you'll see AI in the future.
Does AI facilitate individualized medicine, which has been a big thing for the past 5 or 10 years? Does AI facilitate, further enhance, maximize individualized medicine?
So I believe that it will. One of the things that's really happening right now is someone said earlier that we have been focused for 3,000 years on treating disease. But now there's a lot of things coming down the pipe, not only just to test for Alzheimer's, but also RNA vaccines for cancers. There's a lot of things that are coming GLP-1s for obesity, where you're moving care back upstream to where you're going to start treating early stage disease. This has a massive ripple effect in the healthcare ecosystem, and it's going to be extraordinarily disruptive. And I say good for that, because the next answer is a proactive, like I'd say to you, in 5 years, you're going to have leukemia. So let's figure that out today and fix that so you never get leukemia. That's really a powerful place to be. And I don't think it's going to
It's preventative on steroids.
It's proactive. Yeah. So AI is able to deliver this because it can process this amount of data and give us something to act on.
So AI has been around, as we know, one could say for 10, 15 years, 5 years.
40.
One could argue, back further. What, in your opinion, has fueled the dramatic interest that we see in healthcare over, for argument's sake, the last 5 to 7 years?
So, we haven't really had the opportunity to process huge amounts of data like we do now with the type of semiconductors and things that we have. But we also didn't have this idea that the sophistication of thinking about large language models trains on expertise of data. And, I really love this company called Cohere. Any of you know Aid? Because they're thinking about this like the issues that we have in AI, bias and hallucinations. They're thinking about how to solve those problems and therefore increase the value of all AI, no matter where it is. And one of my favorite projects is really this language project. They're bringing all the known spoken languages into this data set so that they'll be eliminating bias that arises from that. And these kinds of things are going to be super important for us to get to really that great product. But this is what's possible now. Really, Stephen, that wasn't possible 3 years ago, let's say. So we're here. We just need to
Fair.
run.
That's fair. Now, like any other process, like any other new area of technology, we've talked about the positives here, what it can do, what the potential is, the processing of data, the ability to get a potentially more rapid regulatory approval. What do you think are going to be some of the obstacles that AI is facing in becoming adopted into the healthcare culture, environment, et cetera?
So, the first one is the obvious one, which is data insecurity. I mean, everybody's talking about it. There are some ways to keep data from leaking back into a system, air gapping and things like that are coming online. But the real one that I think is dangerous is resistance. The healthcare infrastructure is very well established in this country, and they're all getting paid. And when you go up against that monolith of a system that's so entrenched that it can't even see what the problems are, that resistance could be substantial. Now, I personally think that it's going to be so powerful that there's ways to get people on board, but primary care physicians right now, I would not want to be one, because I don't think that there's a way for them to survive in their current iteration. And so what really bothers me is that the education system, like we're still taking in residents in surgery and telling them that they're going to be doing the same thing that we were told we would be doing. Well, I got to tell you, I was told that I would be operating on the stomach all the time. And then 3 years after I graduated, there was an international ruling that no, ulcers of the stomach were caused by a bacteria that's treated by a medication. And so you're not going to be operating on the stomach. We came back and started operating the stomach in bariatrics. Last year, the bariatric market was 20% down in surgery. This is going to be a continuing trend. So what do we tell a kid that's going to spend 7 years of their life getting educated Why aren't we being more proactive? So I think
Saying
this
the trend is
resistance,
less surgery.
the trend will be less surgery. But I think bricks and mortar generally, in COVID, when I was running this huge OR in COVID, this big section of Banner Health. And I remember that day when we had to cancel all those cases. I remember it. During COVID, we learned a lot of things about our infrastructure. And one of them we really learned was that we needed the infrastructure to treat COVID patients that were really sick, but we didn't need it to do primary care. We could do it from home. We could do all of our pre and post-op visits from home. And that was actually better for the patient. So I think.
But the patients want contact with their physician.
That's what they know. That's what they know. That's what we know.
I think it's pretty clear that patients want contact with physicians. I think that we have a lot of illustrations in the industry.
I know it for a fact since I own a medical practice.
Right. And I might even use that
And
concierge
I've
medical
done the
practice.
phone call part and I've done the patient visits and home visits, and they all want the personal touch because there's a what do you call it, effect, right? You've got the just the palliative aspect of having a person come to you and talk to you, and they're in the room with you and they're talking to you. Right? There's that aspect to it that they want.
Yeah.
And an AI doesn't replace, because I still
Yeah.
have to go and do logic with AI.
Well, the AI we have now compared to the AI we may have in a year and a half or 2 years might look really different. And if you can talk to them at 2 a.m. when you need them, rather than waiting or calling 5
Well, I mean,
times,
you can't talk to your concierge
it is
doctor.
so frustrating to be a
Yeah, but not
patient.
everybody gets access to concierge medicine.
Yeah,
But
almost
the other-
nobody.
The other issue is liability.
Yeah,
right?
so the
If you're
liability,
AI
yeah,
Doctor, who's going to be liable for the recommendations of the AI doctor?
TBD. We don't
I
know.
don't think TBD is simple.
No, we don't know who.
Right, so that's a
Yeah.
pretty long string to unwind.
Well,
So the insurers could be an obstacle for AI's implementation. That's the point you're raising, Marty.
Yeah, right, for AI implementation, as much as they're going to be a.
That's a fair comment.
The FDA will be blockers for shorter term trials, right?
I think the FDA is bought in on the efficiency of AI. I just think they want to see the paperwork. They want to see the validation, the documentation, the rationale for less patients. They want to see that there were 100 patients on this study and we're going to an alternative indication. We can borrow against that. There's already precedent in the FDA regulations. When foreign companies want to get a foreign drug approved in the US, they cross-reference other studies.
My only comment, we've had Tom Farb come in here and he's raised tens of millions of dollars and he's raised millions of dollars from our group. And he's kept on going and saying that the data in healthcare test is bad. Only 50% of healthcare data is replicable, right?
Is what?
Tom Farb can be
well, they
replicated.
just published on this, Marty. They
Right?
just published on this.
And so the data that will go into AI is not great. So before we give all this trust to AI, we have to make sure our data collection is correct.
So your point about trust, I think, is really important.
You-
But
you-
let's just let me just say
Just one sec. You're talking garbage in, garbage out, good stuff in, good stuff out. That we can't control. If there's garbage going in, the end result's going to be garbage. If good stuff is going in, the end result will be good. That's on a different matrix than the process of utilizing AI. If it's being implemented incorrectly, shoddily, sloppily, that's not the fault.
The data that we're training our AI with is bad.
well, it's biased. That's for sure.
It's got holes. It's got
But let
holes.
me just say this, and let me just say this. The data that we trained the physicians on is the same data. So if it's bad for AI, it's also bad for them. And the problem is now things are moving so fast. If I graduated 10 years ago, how current am I?
You're not coming.
How can I process all of these good trials, many of which now are starting to be, multi-trial groupings? How can I process that, use it for clinical decision support in the moment? It's impossible. There's no human brain that can really do this. So what we rely on is having seen thousands of patients. I've operated on 35,000 people in my lifetime. And so I can tell you, I could close my eyes and hit the appendix. But it's not, but that's not really, gonna help.
When
me
I'm on your
matter what
table, I want you to open your eyes.
through a laparoscope. Anyway, so I'm just saying that there's a lot of incorrectness. We just had the Stanford physicians were beat by a computer, which reminds me a little bit of the chess match and the Go match, right? Like we're starting to see this. So I think it's a moment where we really need to step back and really think this through carefully and get a plan.
Right.
We don't have a plan.
Let me ask one question, and we're running a little late. We're going to need a bit of an extension on the back end. Thank you. Good. Last question. Given the current significant upcoming changes in Washington, D.C., how do you perceive this will impact the go forward, the not go forward, go sideways adoption of AI?
It would not surprise me if on day one, the executive order for AI was rescinded. Because there was an order by Biden that was an executive order around AI for privacy and security. And I would think that will be a huge target, especially with some of his advisors right off the bat. So when he's signing those 20 things to rescind executive orders on day one in the Oval Office, it would not surprise me if that was one of them. Second,
AIs are.
Yeah.
That was, I wanted to raise that. Allow me to suggest that I potentially differ with you because Trump has a point. We're not taking political sides here. It's not a political forum. Trump has created an AI czar. One
Right.
would think that he's created an AI czar because he wishes to, maybe this is altruistic and unrealistic, but he wishes to effectively commercialize, utilize, implement, approve, manage, adopt AI in a proper way, like he suggests that he wishes to adopt everything else. So I would interpret differently. I would interpret the AI czar and he's got another title, I forget what it is, but that AI czar, I think it appears to me to be prima facie indication that he wants to roll this thing forward briskly, but wants to roll it forward in effective means.
It's an AI and crypto
So,
czar, and
yeah, it's
he's
AI and
determined
crypto.
It is a strategically relevant technology, and he
Mhm.
wants the US to be the global leader in it.
I think so. I think we want to be the global leader in AI.
definitely.
We want to apply it with the proper constraints, mitigating controls, so on and so forth. That would be my perception. Okay, we're allowed to disagree.
Yes, for sure. But the thing about this AI czar, it's really important to realize he's a White House employee, special employee. He can work 130 days a year. He does not require Senate confirmation. And that is a really important part of this because he's appointed through the White House.
Oh, the 130 days
He's not
is
actually-
the
he's not an
old school.
employee yet. He's running his venture capital fund, and then he's gonna be doing this on the side.
Yeah, these are the guys that seem to be coming into positions of authority are not 130 day out of 365 guys. These are all like 12-hour day guys, 7-day a week guys. That's the impression I have. There are a whole bunch of no nonsense guys, but again, I don't.
According to the feds, he can actually work a total of 130 days a year, or he has to be confirmed.
All right. I'm just going to suggest that we move to our next speaker to give an adequate amount of time to Norm, because I think Norm is going to bring some relevant commentary to us about how to commercialize and take advantage of these developments. Our next speaker is Norm Friedland, and Norm is a co-founder of a company called Full Sky Partners. Full Sky is a nationally recognized organization with expertise in mission funding with a focus in life science and healthcare. And mission funding is a unique, novel funding strategy for private foundations and similar entities. And I'm going to ask Norm to introduce himself and just provide a little more commentary. I would also like to add that Norm is a Root Tilden Scholar from the NYU Law School, and he started his career with a very significant law firm called Cravath, Swaine and Moore. Norm, I know you're on the screen. Why don't you give us a little more color on your background? for a moment or
Hello,
two,
hello,
please?
hello, Steve. Thank you. Robin Colby, hello to you. I see Mark is in the audience. Marco, I enjoyed your presentation. And I won't tell you where I am, but I think it's a lot warmer than where you are. What a great presentation.
You think or you know?
What a great presentation by the panel. And my contribution to this is to point out that the developments that Colby and Robin have described are all so transformative for healthcare that what you are seeing today sounded like science fiction 5 years ago. What you're seeing today, 5 years from now, is going to seem like science fiction. The knowledge that's being created is spectacular, and the challenge is how do we get it funded in a way that makes those patient solutions accessible and available.
Thank you for that lead in. So would you explain to our audience what mission funding is and its status with the IRS and how it fits neatly with nonprofits and foundations and how it can be utilized for commercial purposes for development stage companies and technologies?
Sure. So, there's a saying that when you hear hoofbeats, nobody thinks of zebras. In the United States, you've got several hundreds of billions of dollars sitting in private foundations. You have a tsunami of wealth transfer that's occurring. The number is something like $80 trillion. It's going from my generation, Steve, to your generation.
I think I'm older than you, but that's okay.
And some portion of that tsunami is going to go for philanthropy. The challenge is how do we access that capital, that philanthropic capital, so that it's for mission purposes. And what the IRS allows a private foundation to do, and it allows a DAF to do, a donor advised fund to do, is to fund a for-profit company. And that's allowed so long as there's an alignment of mission. And there's several other requirements that we understand. But what we have found as we have been looking at this, and we've been talking to these foundations and particularly talking to the wealth managers, and Mark Heil, if you're there, I appreciate your counsel on this. We are educating these wealth managers and these private foundations to understand how they can use this capital impactfully in the healthcare space. This is not an IRS gimmick. It's not a hide the salami story. This is mainstream IRS regulations that just haven't been unlocked, and that's what we're doing. And it's interesting because one of the companies that Colby mentioned, iOncology out of Gainesville, we've been introduced to Dr. Mitchell, and we started to introduce him to some of the foundation people in the Gainesville area that we know. This is probably 2 or 3 weeks ago, but I'm looking forward to going up to Gainesville and meeting Dr. Mitchell, because I think what he has is truly transformative.
Okay, so in summary, compare and contrast mission funding versus venture capital or private equity funding. Just give us a bit of a snapshot on how they differ.
Sure. So I was a venture capital tech transfer lawyer since before the fax machine. Robin, you don't know what a fax machine is. Colby, you have no idea what a fax machine is. Steve, you
Colby
might
doesn't know how to read a
fax
fax machine. Come on.
The VCs have a very direct model, and they've got fiduciary obligations, and that model looks to maximize the return within a 5 to 7 year period of time. And there's really very little flexibility for that. If you're financing a life science company, you can't be sure that the rats are going to, survive. And you might have to do some other experiments to see if the rats can live a little bit longer. And what Mission Capital does is give these companies the patient capital to do the clinical trials, to do the transformative research. And more importantly, because the cost of capital is a lot less than the VC cost of capital, that patient solution can be delivered affordably and accessibly.
All right. Fair enough.
Norm's a deep thought right now.
What's that?
Oh, God. No, he just finished his thought.
Okay. How does Mission Capital work with, interface, become adopted, and get utilized by companies in the development stage? What are the features of development stage companies that lend themselves well to being targets for Mission Capital funding?
So we've probably seen 200 or 300 business plans from these life science companies, and there's a commonality to them. They talk about the great science they have, and they talk about the total available market, and they talk about the ROI. None of that is going to be important to the Mission Capital people. What the Mission Capital audience wants to know is what patients are going to get benefited. These are patients with rare diseases. These are patients with ultra rare diseases. These are patients with common diseases who don't have access because of cost. That's got to be the presentation. And the science is interesting, but that's secondary. The total available market is of no interest. The ROI is of no interest. It's really, is there an authentic management team, or is there a management team that has an authentic commitment to patient benefit? And if that's the case, then what needs to happen is that business plan needs to be redesigned for a Mission Capital audience. And if that's done, then the presentation to the mission funders is possible. And what we're looking at is to talk to these mission funders not as a one-off, but via the wealth managers, via the wealth advisors, to talk to literally hundreds of these private family foundations, where the ask is not $20 million from a particular funder, but $500,000 from 50 of them. And so now you're getting at scale capital. You're doing it in a distributed risk scenario, and you're doing it with documentation, which is what we provide, that minimizes the transaction costs of the deal.
Okay.
Norm, I got a question for you.
Go ahead.
How much active mission capital is there being allocated today to healthcare?
Wow, that is a great question. I don't have the answer to that, Marty.
How about an
What I
order of
know
magnitude?
is that there's, and we know this, the family offices, and you've heard me say this, illness doesn't look at your FICO score. Every family office, every high net worth individual has experienced, either directly or indirectly, some kind of catastrophic illness. What they haven't been presented with are really effective financing solutions for the companies that Colby is working with, the company that you just heard present in Alzheimer's. I mean, that's a perfect case for a Mission Capital story. And
Sure, Norm.
what
Like a
they
great
should
example is that the Louders have this Parkinson's Institute here in New York City. Is that right?
The Louders have committed tremendous dollars both to Parkinson's and to breast cancer.
So why don't they have a mission capital mission out there?
Well, I'm not sure that they don't. It's interesting because one of the one of the companies we are working with wants us to talk to the Louder family. My suspicion is that they don't really, they've never heard this story, Marty.
You need to drive up to the house and give them the storyline here. It's a good funding source. Last question for you. Can you give us an example of a company that you've worked with where they've adopted AI means and technologies to facilitate product development, drug development, et cetera, that has availed itself or themselves of mission funding? Is there an example? You could mention it without a name, you could describe it generically just to give us a little focus and perspective on it.
Sure. We're working with a company now that is going to be the global leader in gene therapy. And Marty, you know who I'm talking about. They come out of the University of Pennsylvania. This is a platform technology to understand and diagnose genetic defects and understand how to develop the therapeutics for gene therapy. And AI is going to play a huge role in that. It's going to play a role in that in patient recruitment. It's going to play a role in that in getting the FDA approval, because there was mention of the fact that the FDA for gene therapy is looking to streamline those approvals. Because gene therapy, once you've got a platform, then every therapeutic is simply a variation of the platform. So once you've validated the platform, the particular target becomes a lot easier to get approval for.
Okay. Anybody have any questions or comments? Going once, right?
I have a question.
So, here we go.
So do we think that AI might be better in terms of monitoring human activity than actually trying to produce solutions? Like more of a tool set than the platform? What are your thoughts on that?
I've got a thought. My panel might see it differently. I think that that AI's strength lies in its ability to do the analytics, sort the data, evaluate the data, analyze the data, arrange the data in an array predefined or to be defined later to produce an objective, a logical, and intended outcome. So I don't see AI as a monitoring tool. I see AI as for lack of a better term, the IT people may not like this, a computational tool. Yeah.
So Robin, I'm going to jump in because you made the comment about the doctors and how they're trained. The statistic I heard for oncology doctors was staggeringly depressive. I.e., you've got 70% of them have been out of medical school for what, 25 or 30 years, Robin?
Yes.
And so when you talk the omics, it's a foreign language to them. And so, it seems to me that AI is going to give them some confidence that they're going to be able to get the right diagnosis for the patient and the right recommendations. They're still going to use their judgment, but it's going to give them the ability to sort through all this data that they can't do now.
And what I like about that is that you're really getting the strength of both systems. Once the doctor learns to trust the AI and really work with it correctly and understands it, then their translation to people can be much more granular and much more convincing, and critically more effective and more accurate.
I'll just add one thing. We're reviewing a startup company in our accelerator, and they have a tech platform that they're designing to empower the patient to be the CEO of their health. And what they're saying is that it can maybe diagnose certain diseases prior to their internist just because the data influx that the platform. So there's definitely an energy moving towards it. I'm not sure that it's going to take the whole market, but for patients that are very in tune with their health, they might kind of go that way. So there'll be a need for, I think, both camps.
I think that's very valid. I would add one or two points before we just wrap up. I would say that number one, most physicians, GPs primarily resist technology. That's A. And they fear AI because AI, instead of recognizing that AI is a tool for them to incorporate, they see AI as competitive to their interests. And I don't think that that's the case at all, but that's an outgrowth of the first point, which is this class of citizen doesn't embrace technology well. They just got to utilize it better so they can do a higher order. I know you had a question, I've forgotten. Just so they have the ability to do a higher order functionality. So they tend to be poor adapters of
I don't agree with that.
you know.
I don't agree with that. Because
Okay.
from my experience is that general practitioners have been using AI now for 5 years for note taking, and that the level of quality on diagnostic is a lot of times already AI is getting to recommendations before they even into notes.
I think that where we don't necessarily see that the same way, but where the GPs embrace AI, in my opinion, please react over here if there's a doc in the audience. I think when the diagnostic tests come back and the results come back and the therapeutic testing comes back, it's been evolved via an AI means, and they get the benefit of that. They get a more precise diagnosis, assessment, reaction. I think they adopt it in that regard, but they shun it. They kind of see as it's competitive. But there was another question.
One of the positives, Marty, of what you're saying is that the AI is able to pull in details about the patient that the doctor won't see and can't see because of the way the records are constructed. And so that's a big benefit. But, we got to remember that we're talking about New York City here. We're not talking about Iowa. We're not talking about Arizona or places where there's a really big difference. There's a big difference in equity in healthcare. It's massive.
Why don't we talk about the Bronx?
But yeah, the Bronx. Yeah, I've not been a lot to the Bronx yet, early in my New York experience. But the other thing is there are countries, Singapore, Rwanda, Korea, that come to mind that don't have the infrastructure we have. And they're progressing a lot faster along this highway than we are because they can. They don't have to go through the resistance
Yeah, they have
of the technology. And so they're jumping over. And I think that's a really important thing to realize. We look at ourselves as the leaders, as the big innovators. We better watch out. There are a lot of people innovating around us globally.
You had a question.
I think part of the problem is that what truly is AI. A lot of people purport themselves to be AI. So there's that gray fog of, are they truly AI? When you start to get into generative AI, right? Where I think you're going to see the most adoption or the early adoption is big pharma. Big pharma spends hundreds of millions of dollars to identify molecules, to go through the phase testings, and how these companies, these big pharmaceutical companies view it as, we'll use like this Sandbox AQ simulation product. We'll take a small molecule, say it's for GBM, right? For glioblastoma, right? But they'll find a pathway that they think the molecule will have the best way of passing through the phase trials. So it'll take what typically takes hundreds of millions of dollars going through these trials to fail in phase 3. What they'll do is they'll identify targets that they think have the best chance, probability-wise, based upon all the quantitative data they have on all the past trials they have on file, right? They'll be able to assess the best path of probability for each molecule. Is that?
I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
That's what's
Where you're
happening.
gonna see the
But
adoption
this
initially.
is a similar thing to looking for materials that don't conduct heat. They're using the same supercomputing capabilities,
Correct.
the
Yeah.
same way of looking at this thing. This is the way we find the future,
Great.
is we let someone look for it that can do it now.
But there's a capitalistic motivation to it. These companies will
Yeah.
identify more molecules, right? Bring more drugs, right? There'll be breakthrough technologies, and it'll feed the whole industry.
So I think there's one more point to be made. Maybe somebody will disagree. It might be controversial. The AI technology was developed by engineers, software people, computer people, people of that genre. And really, when we're talking about AI in medicine, it's the application engineering, it's the application of those technologies to medical conditions. And that's really how we're commercializing AI in medicine. We're not developing AI for an indication. We're harnessing the horse to pull a different kind of plow that tills the soil in a way that we get better productivity, more rapid drug development, more rapid molecular identification of what's going to fail in phase 2, in phase 3. I think that's
But one of the things that's happening right now, which is very exciting, they just reported the first data on this project, is they're mapping every cell in the human body and every connection to every cell. And they're understanding the signaling between cells and disease. once we've
previously
got that-
impossible,
Once we've got that,
right?
just Katie bar the door, because
Correct.
then we will have not only computational power, but we'll have specificity for the human body. And it's gonna, I think this project is going very fast, much faster than we thought it would go. So it's probable that we'll have this map in 3 years, I think, max.
Robin, I'm gonna get all of your predictions down on paper and we're gonna.
Get them on and I'll come back.
We have one more
Book-
question
book
and
coming out
call it a
this
day.
third quarter.
Yes, ma'am.
So, as a drug developer who's also
A bit louder so we can all hear you.
I'm going to say, as a drug developer who's also worked on AI and finding new targets, I would like to differ with the panel a little bit.
Why don't you grab the mic from somebody here? So
I said, as a drug developer who's worked on AI finding new targets and new drugs, I speak this from experience. I do agree with you that there's a lot more in diagnostic and putting patients, selecting them for the right trials. But for forming new drugs or making new connections, we have a very, very long way to go. You know, we've been waiting. In the times of COVID, there was a lot of money thrown on these companies, tech bio companies, as they were called, AI, machine learning enabled drug discovery companies. None of them have panned out so far because the biology is way more complex. What they're using AI for is to make better of the same kind, like a better Avastin, for example, because the data is there for existing drugs. And they can use that data to teach the machines to make a better drug with toned down safety or better binding or whatever the case may be.
I have a question. Would you agree that AI is purposeful in studying molecular activity and predictability of the functionality at a molecular level faster than experimentation in the conventional means? You're a drug developer. I'm asking the question.
So if you
Because
ask
that's
me,
the operative point.
if you ask me today, I would say we are not ready to make that jump. No.
Marty's not going to let you sign up for the next session.
That's
Oh, no, I think
He
AI
agrees
will
with it.
become a great scorer,
Yeah.
but will not become
She's a drug developer.
will not become a great predictor, will not be, I mean, in other words, you can score the probability of success, but it won't design the pathway for you.
yes. And again, this is as of today. I'm talking
good.
about today, but there is a role of AI as you guys first started, trying to sort of stratify patients, do diagnostics, read images, do the job of pathologist. So all of that exists. But when you test new drugs for treatments, it still needs a long way to go. So that's all I'm saying. And I hope people can, and I speak this selfishly, that I hope people can see the value in traditional drug development. We can be aided by AI. We need the capital and the patient capital, to actually do the right testing for many of the diseases out there.
Well, you have a perspective from the real world here. Okay.
Someone in an earlier panel today said that they were anxious about picking a certain technology in AI because it would get better so fast and it would change so quickly. And I think that's the unknown that we're all sitting here tonight, is how fast will that happen? When will it happen? And will the things that we invest in now be relevant in 3 years, including maybe our own future?
No, absolutely. There's no doubt about it. But, there was a lot of money, put into that sector. And I don't have to say that. You can look at the results and all out there. We're waiting. I mean, we would love to shorten our duration of, getting the drugs to the market. Yes. And less capital. Yeah.
Thank you for the comment.
Okay, thank you very much.